Hello, this is webhostingrewind.com with another video helping you pick the best web hosting company for your need. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date on all things web hosting related. Also, click the links in the description to learn more about each web hosting company that is discussed on this channel. These links are affiliate links, and I will receive a small commission if you purchase through the links below. Also, if you purchase using the links below, you will receive exclusive bonuses not offered anywhere else. The commissions go to supporting the channel to continue to provide relevant and unbiased information. In this video, I want to briefly describe and define what web hosting is, why you need it, and a little bit of how it works. Web hosting can be one of those confusing things that people know they need it, but they aren't really sure why they need it, and hopefully this video will help clear some of that up. So Wikipedia defines web hosting as a service type of internet hosting service that allows individuals and organizations to make their website accessible via the World Wide Web. So that definition is a little confusing. It doesn't really answer the question. It doesn't really help you as the consumer figure out what it is and why you need it. So when people ask me what is web hosting and why do I need it, I like to answer very simply. Web hosting is basically an online hard drive where you store your internet files. So when you think about it, a web hosting basically comprises of a server. It comprises of a series of servers, and that gets off into the weeds. But in reality, your website is basically comprised of a series of files, audio, video, document. And in order for your website to be displayed on computers around the world, you need a place to store that. So it's just like a hard drive on your computer. Let's say you're looking at a Mac. In order for you to open up a Mac and read your Word documents, you need to store that you need to store that Word document somewhere. And I store the Word document on my hard drive. And that's basically what web hosting is. You store your internet files or your website files on a server, which is basically a hard drive, and people will access that hard drive, that server, from around the world using a web address. Now, there are two types of web addresses. There is a human readable web address, and there are computer readable web addresses. So for example, webhostingrewind.com is a human readable web address. Our customers go to webhostingrewind.com so that they can find out the latest news and information on web hosting. When a human types in webhostingrewind.com, the computer converts that to 192.168.2.1.1. It can be accessed to the server location. So when you think about web hosting, you must realize that it's basically a place where you store your website files on the internet, and humans type in a domain, which is a web address. For example, webhostingrewind.com, they type it in, they'll be taken to that server space, they'll be taken to that hard drive. They can read, watch, and listen to the information that is stored at that server location. So you absolutely need to have some type of web hosting, whether it's free, whether it's paid, in order for you to have a website. Now, I talk mostly on this channel about paid web hosting services because they come with less restriction. Now, there are a number of different free services out there. I don't normally recommend them. Maybe I'll do a video in the future about the best free web hosting services. For example, you could use WordPress.com. I think Wix has a free web hosting service. There are a few other ones out there, but in my personal opinion, if you want complete freedom without restrictions, without being monitored or moderated, you need to go out and purchase your own hosting provider, your own domain name, and your web hosting platform. There are a ton of options out there that will be discussed in future videos. In general, there is shared hosting, there's VPS hosting, and then there's like a dedicated WordPress management site out there. Each one has its strengths and weaknesses, which I'll discuss in future videos. But shared hosting is the most entry level, it's the most basic, and what you're doing is you're sharing server space with other users, other people that want their website stored at the same web hosting provider. While this provides benefits as being less expensive than the other options, it's a little bit more risky. There's a few different risks involved. For example, if the server is oversold, basically what that means is the server has space for, let's say, 10 websites, and the hosting provider puts on 20, 30, or 40, that's going to slow down everybody's website. Now, web hosting providers try and do their best to not oversell a server, but it is possible and it has happened. Usually what happens, and this is going to be a little bit more technical, is when they get to a capacity, let's say a server has a space for 10, when they get to about 8 or even 9, they'll move a couple people over to a new server, so then the servers are back at 4 apiece. Shady web hosting providers that may have budgetary constraints, they may oversell a server by 20, 30, 40, 50%, just so that they can start getting some revenue in. Another drawback of using a shared plan is one website or one customer could be using up all of the resources. So for example, let's say one customer gets a lot of traffic, but they're on a very inexpensive plan where they're sharing resources with you. That could slow down your website because there are a finite amount of resources available for each server. Another issue could come in. Let's say one of the websites gets a virus. Maybe it becomes a bot website where it's sending out traffic, spyware traffic, malware, you name it. It's sending out traffic across the web. That takes up a lot of resources, and it could actually impact your website. Depending on the level of security that the web hosting provider has, it could actually have a negative impact and affect your website. So there are strengths and weaknesses to each. Like I said, with shared hosting, it's the least expensive. It's usually what most people get into if they're just starting out, but it does have its drawback. The second option is a VPS, a virtual private server. And basically what that means is you get your own little chunk of server space. This again has its strengths and weaknesses. You have basically, depending on the web hosting provider, you may get your own server or you get your own dedicated chunk of a larger server, depending on how they use the definition. But this again, strengths and weaknesses. It is going to be a little bit more expensive. You get a chunk of resources all to yourself. A VPS is good if you're starting to see a little bit of traffic, if you have multiple websites, if you're concerned with security, with privacy, and you just want to do a little bit of testing. A VPS could be good for you. But again, I didn't want to get too far off in the woods. I just want to do a quick definition of what web hosting is and why you need it. When you think of web hosting, you think of a domain name or a human readable name, but in reality, it's two separate things. Web hosting is where your website is stored essentially, and domain name is the human readable name that you can go and buy. One thing that most people don't realize is that you can actually buy your domain name and have it point somewhere else. For example, I could buy my domain name from GoDaddy because it's $4.99, but I could have it point to a web host at Bluehost. Now that's basically changing the name servers, and I may do a video showing you how to do that. Every web hosting provider is different, but for the most part, it's a similar or the same process. Another thing you can do, again, like I said, is you can actually point your domain name to a different location. And one of the ways that web hosting providers make their money is they try and sell a package where they offer a free domain name for a first year, but then after the first year, the domain name goes up to like $20 or $30. Within the domain name, they also have different upsells like ID protection, spam filtering, all of those different things. But that is outside the scope of this video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, definitely leave them in the comment section below. If you have any future video ideas, I'd be happy to answer them. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe. To learn more about this web hosting company or any other web hosting company discussed on this channel, be sure to check out the links in the description. Once again, this is Web Hosting Rewind, helping you pick the best web hosting company for your needs. Also, if you purchase using the links below, you will receive exclusive bonuses not offered anywhere else. The commissions go to supporting the channel to continue to provide relevant and unbiased information. Thank you and have a great night.